Hi, this is Clare Lopez with the Center for Security Policy. We're at an overlook point looking down onto Jerusalem, and you can see the golden dome of the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem behind me as well. You may also be able to see a number of the walls that run around this area. Right behind me is an area of Jerusalem from which a number of terrorists have come. That those walls are there to protect and to keep those terrorists out. We're going to be receiving a briefing very shortly from retired IDF Colonel Dan Tirza about these features and how and why and when these walls were built. He, Colonel Tirza, was the builder. He was the director of the building of those walls you see behind me, built to protect the Israeli citizens of Israel from the terrorists that came and originated from this area. So, overlooking Jerusalem, Clare Lopez, Center for Security Policy. We're in Jerusalem. We're at the Ramada Hotel, a lovely hotel where we are staying on the trip with the United West. And with me here today is retired Colonel from the IDF, Dan Tirza. We're going to talk about his work in designing and building, constructing many of the border security fences and walls that have kept Israel safe now, really since the Second Intifada. So, Colonel, it is an honor, it's a pleasure to be with you this evening, and thank you so much for being willing to speak with us.
Thank you. I am here for you.
All right. What I might ask to begin with is how you came to lead or to be in charge of this effort to construct the fences, the border security areas, the walls, and how that followed after the experience of the Second Intifada, which was so horrific, and during which time 2000, 2002, 3, 4. So many suicide bombers in particular were able to cross over into Israel proper from Judea and Samaria, but also there was sniper fire and gunfire coming from those areas down into Israeli areas. So can you talk a little bit about how that experience led you and Israel to decide how important it was to define and to protect your borders?
Well, thank you. From 1994, I was in charge of defining the borders of Israel in the negotiations with the Palestinians. I took part in all the negotiations with the Palestinians about the future peace, and so I became the expert of mapping in this area. I know the area very well, and we tried in a lot of ways to find the right balance, how people can live with borders and how to define the right borders. So when this terror attack of 2000, what you're calling the Second Intifada, started, I was the one that was the expert of the area, the expert of borders. So therefore I was called to this duty with all the knowledge that I collected for peace. Now I had to use it just to prevent the Palestinian terror from coming to Israel.
That was a horrific experience, I'm sure, for you as well as for many Israelis. Can you talk just a little bit about how porous the border areas were at the time of the outbreak of the Second Intifada, which was in the year 2000, and how easy it was for these jihad Islamic terrorists to cross over the border, and also for those living on the other side in higher buildings and apartments to shoot down into Israeli civilian areas? How easy was that for them at that time?
Well, you have to understand that in 2000 there was nothing between the sides. You can cross wherever you want, whenever you want. There is a very long line, but only on maps, not on the ground. On the ground you can cross wherever you want. The West Bank is defined by the west bank of the Jordan River, but Israel itself is in the west bank of the Jordan River. The line, what we are calling the green line, was just a ceasefire line between Israel and Jordan, nothing with the Palestinians. So it was all open. We were just after the negotiation fell down. So the area was all open and you can cross whenever you want, wherever you want. And the Palestinians abuse this goodwillness of Israel to have good life in their side. So they abuse it and they use it for themselves to come and make terror attacks inside Israel or shoot from their areas toward Israel. I just want to give you one example. The main road of Israel, Cross Israel Highway, there are two Palestinian towns near this road, Tulkarem and Kalkilia. We thought that they can use the Israeli highway, but now they were shooting from their towns to where the traffic that runs on the main highway of Israel. So we had to construct the concrete walls to protect the traffic from the Palestinian snipers. In other places, like inside Jerusalem, the difference between the Palestinian side and Israel itself is just the other side of the road. So people were coming from the Palestinian side, just coming to the side of the road, cross to the other side, or throw cocktail bottles or hand grenades, or shoot from one side to the other. All the country became a battlefield. It's a very, very small country.
Indeed. Can you explain maybe a little bit about how you made the decision about what kind of a barrier would go in which places? You know, when we look at the Western media very often, what is shown typically are these great big high concrete slabs that are very high, and people think this is the entire wall. That's what they think this wall looks like everywhere. But now that we, with the United West and the Heritage Tours, have been here for about a week, we have seen many places where the border delineation, the barrier between Judea and Samaria and Israel proper is not concrete slabs at all. So can you tell us a little bit about how you decided which kind of barrier would go?
Well, it's not only barriers, it's a whole concept, security concept. When we are dealing about stopping terror, and it wasn't the jihad that time, it was in the Palestinian organization called the Tanzim, the youngers of El Fatah. El Fatah is the core party in the Palestinian side. Yasser Arafat was the head of El Fatah at that time, so he can stop it in one day, but he didn't. He used the terror as a tool in the negotiation with Israel. Not a legitimate one, but as a tool. And we had to stop it. So we tried to stop it by the army, by getting inside the Palestinian areas, trying to catch them in their places, trying to block the roads, trying to do things on the ground like finding out where the laboratories are, where they're making those explosives. We tried all the time to find out a way to stop the terror without constructing a barrier, because we were just after the negotiation and we thought that we will build a lines only when we'll have an agreed line between the sides. And the Israeli government didn't want to construct any barrier on the ground. But then there were so many terror attacks that we had to do it. The idea what to build in the ground was that it will be temporary, because we'll go to peace in a very short time. So I tried to construct wire fences all over the area. 95% of this big project of 451 miles long, only 5% are concrete walls. All the other are wire fences, as you saw today, on the ground. But in the media, they always show you only the concrete walls. The idea was that we will build walls only on places that we cannot construct concrete wire fences, like in urban areas when there is no space to build a wire fence system that it's about 45 meters wide. So in these areas, we had to construct concrete walls because we took a measured decision not to destroy or evacuate even one Palestinian house by building the fence. I'm talking about 451 miles long, and not even one Palestinian house was destroyed or evacuated by building the fence. So in urban areas, concrete walls. Another reason. In urban areas, I wanted to reduce the friction between the soldiers and the people that lives on the ground. I didn't want that some Palestinian children will stone the fence. The fence is very sensitive, so the fence will react, the soldiers will run, and it will start something between the soldiers and the people on the ground. And there is another reason. The fence cost a lot of money, and they didn't want the Palestinian to harm the fence. And therefore, in urban areas, concrete walls, and all the other of the area are wire fences. They are very, very sophisticated fences with a lot of sensors on them, so we can detect before they are getting to the fence, on the fence, and if they're trying to cross it, and then run after them and catch them before they get to the targets. It's a very short distance between the fence and the first Israeli houses, the targets of the terror. So we have to be in every place in not more than 5 minutes. So we need a lot of forces on the ground. We need very sophisticated electronic systems, and we have to be aware of all the time. It's not something that you are building and you forget it. You all the time, every night, Israeli soldiers are trying to prevent terror attacks inside the Palestinian areas. The Israeli intelligence works all the time. The coordination with the Palestinian police is working all the time. So it's a system that works all the time. It's not only the barrier that stops the terror, it's the whole system.
You know, Colonel Dan Tirza, again here with the formerly retired from the IDF. I want to repeat, just for the viewers, that one statistic that you just mentioned, which I think many people perhaps don't realize. 451 miles of fencing and barriers, of which 5%, only 5%, is actually made of those great big tall concrete slabs. I think that's incredibly important to mention and to repeat. Can you tell us now perhaps a little bit about what has been the result after you have finished, perhaps not completely finished, but you have constructed this much fencing, defining the borders, defining the border areas. What has been the result in terms of safety and security for the Israeli people after you've done all of that work?
Well, from 2000 till the end of 2006, we had in Israel more than 3,000 terror attacks. We lost in this period 1,562 people that were murdered by terror attacks. And from January 2007 till today, we had from the West Bank to Israel only 50 terror attacks, and we lost in this period 40 people. Of course, I cannot say only because everyone is a whole world, but you can see the big difference. It's not only the fence, but the fence is the infrastructure that works on the ground.
That is remarkable. And I think it really has implications for other places, for example, in the United States and along our southern border with Mexico, for example, where we are dealing not necessarily or only with possible terrorists, Islamic terrorists, jihadis, but we're dealing with human trafficking, we're dealing with contraband, with counter-narcotics operations, and so much more. Could you project or discuss maybe a little bit how the example of what you've accomplished here in Israel might be applicable, might be useful, helpful for the United States as an example, and would it be helpful and applicable for our southern border with Mexico, as far as you can tell from here?
Well, thank you. I really believe that every country in the world have the right to control the borders. Otherwise, it won't be a state. Because if you can go and bring whatever you want, you can get criminals inside, you cannot keep your law. So therefore, you have the right to keep your borders. Of course, it's a matter of policy, of immigration. That's another thing at all. And that's an interior thing about the policy. But you have to control it through checkpoints or through ways that you can enter the people that you want, and the other won't let them come in. You have to see it as a whole project. It's not only to construct barriers on the ground. You have to think about the checkpoints. You have to think about how people can cross, what you're doing before it, how you take the motivation of people down before they are getting to the fences, how you detect the people in the way to the fence, what you're doing with the people that you catch, how you cooperate between all your forces on the ground. All the governmental entities have to work together to have the same communication system, work in one control room, share the intelligence between them. And if they're working together, probably they will multiply their forces on the ground, and it will be easier to control the border. Today, when every entity is working in another way, you cannot control it. And the main thing in the United States, I think today, is that they are fitting the problem to the solution and not the solution to the problem. And therefore, in a lot of places that you see that they are just constructing barriers, and you don't think what happens under the barrier or what happens to the people around the barriers. So there are a lot of questions that you have to ask yourself, and of course you have to fit the legal procedure to what you are doing, and that's a whole thing. We call it the concept, building the concept, and from the concept you're building the things that you want to do, and every governmental entity has a part in that. You take all the knowledge from all these entities together, you multiply your forces on the ground, and it will be easier for you to do it. We know how to do it from Israel. We have the right technology in Israel, and of course we are ready to share our expertise with the United States, our biggest ally.
Thank you so much. This has been tremendously helpful. Colonel Dan Tirza, retired from the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, with us here today in Jerusalem and talking about the importance of defining and delineating a border, the importance of that for national sovereignty, for safety and security of the citizens of that country, and how, in fact, Israel has addressed these issues over the years. So, Colonel Tirza, thank you so much for being with us today. Much appreciate everything that you have shared with us. This is Clare Lopez with the Center for Security Policy.